Before your frozen food gets expensive, it usually disappears into a warehouse you were never supposed to notice. Not the farm, not the supermarket. A refrigerated box the size of several football fields, sitting off a highway near a port, quietly deciding whether chicken, berries, fries, and seafood move today, next week, or after prices rise. This is not really a story about food inflation. It is a story about cold storage, the invisible layer between harvest and checkout.
And my argument is simple. When a handful of warehouse operators control scarce refrigerated space, while electricity costs swing and inventory timing becomes a financial weapon, they gain subtle power over food availability, margins, and the price you end up paying. Think of cold storage as a time machine for food. It doesn't create supply. It creates optionality. A box of frozen chicken in a crowded freezer is not just dinner. It is a decision waiting to be monetized. Sell now or hold. Release inventory or ration space. Favor one customer, delay another. That choice matters more when the market is tight. The industry looks boring from the outside. Concrete walls, ammonia pipes, loading bays, but the economics are anything but boring.
Lineage became the dominant player through an acquisition spree that stretched across North America and Europe. Americold built another giant network, tied to ports, food processors, and retailers. United States cold storage remained a major private force. NewCold expanded with highly automated facilities. In practice, a relatively small club controls a huge share of strategic temperature-controlled space in key corridors. In the United States, cold storage capacity has become increasingly concentrated around logistics hubs linked to import flows and supermarket distribution. USDA cold storage reports track inventories for products like meat, butter, cheese, and frozen poultry every month. Those reports are watched closely because they reveal something the average shopper never sees. Food can be physically present in the system and still feel scarce at the shelf. Why? Because location, release timing, and storage cost decide whether inventory behaves like supply or like leverage. And this is where the story gets sharper. If you own farms, you grow food. If you own supermarkets, you sell food. But if you control the refrigerated middle, you influence when food becomes available, to whom, and at what carrying cost. That is quieter power. In my view, it is one of the least discussed choke points in the modern food economy. Start with energy. Refrigerated warehouses are basically giant machines that turn electricity into time. Blast freezing, compressors, backup systems, insulated dock operations, and 24-hour monitoring all depend on power. When electricity prices spike, storage economics change immediately. In Europe, after the energy shock of 2022, operators and food companies faced dramatically higher operating costs. Reuters and the Financial Times both documented how energy-intensive businesses, including cold chain operators and food processors, were squeezed as gas and power costs surged. That cost does not stay in the utility bill. It travels through storage fees, handling fees, and inventory decisions until it lands in your grocery basket. But higher costs alone do not explain the full mechanism. The real influence comes from timing. Frozen food, meat, and some dairy products can sit for weeks or months. That means cold storage is not just a warehouse service, it is a timing market. If
wholesale prices are weak today but expected to improve, holding inventory can make economic sense. If space is scarce, warehouse operators can raise rates, prioritize high-volume customers, and make smaller buyers compete for access. Who loses first? Often regional distributors, independent grocers, and smaller importers. And when they pay more, you pay more. I think this is the part most people miss. We imagine prices are set by farms, brands, or supermarkets. Yet in a tight chain, the middle can quietly rewrite the margin structure without ever appearing on the label. Have you ever wondered why the same frozen product can jump in price even when commodity headlines look calm? Sometimes the answer is not at the farm. It is in a freezer dock schedule outside Rotterdam, Savannah, or Long Beach. And the concentration is not accidental. Scale matters enormously in this business. Large operators spread fixed energy costs, labor systems, software, and transport integration across giant networks. They can place facilities near ports, rail ramps, and dense population centers. They can offer bundled services, storage, drayage coordination, customs adjacent handling, case picking, even data visibility. That makes them more attractive to the biggest food companies, which then reinforces their dominance. Efficient? Yes. Competitive in the long run? Not always. Look at the port connection. Imported seafood, frozen fruit, meat, and prepared foods often move from vessel to refrigerated warehouse before heading inland. If a few operators dominate the facilities near major gateways, they become the thermal gatekeepers of trade. During disruptions, that position gets stronger. The world learned this during the pandemic, when logistics bottlenecks turned ordinary infrastructure into pricing power. Cold storage did not cause all food inflation, of course, but it amplified the effect by deciding how smoothly temperature-sensitive inventory could move through the system. Mini hook. But the warehouse itself is only half the story. The other half sits on a spreadsheet. Cold storage turns inventory into finance. Public companies in logistics and food distribution talk constantly about margins, occupancy, and throughput. When occupancy rises in a constrained market, pricing power usually follows. Americold's filings have repeatedly described how warehouse revenue depends on storage and handling, while Lineage has emphasized network scale and integrated logistics. Translation: the fuller the cold chain gets, the more valuable each pallet position becomes. A pallet slot starts acting like a scarce hotel room during a convention weekend. That scarcity changes behavior up and down the chain. A processor may ship earlier than ideal just to secure space. An importer may accept higher storage rates to avoid spoilage risk. A retailer may lock in supply at a higher cost because stockouts are even worse. Once enough players act defensively, prices rise even before the consumer notices shortages. This is why food inflation can feel sudden. The pressure builds in warehouses first, then appears at the shelf all at once. There is also a political economy angle here that deserves more attention. We regulate farms, inspect food plants, and scrutinize supermarket prices. Yet the refrigerated middle remains strangely invisible to the public imagination. That invisibility matters. Power is easier to exercise when consumers don't know where to look. And honestly, I find that unsettling. If 4 or 5 networks can shape the timing and cost of access to essential food categories, shouldn't that be part of the inflation conversation? Mini hook. And then power prices collided with concentration in a way that made the system even more fragile. But wait. The biggest twist is that cold storage giants do not need to set food prices directly to influence them. They only need to control the conditions under which everyone else makes decisions. That is a very different kind of market power. In 2024 and 2025, food companies kept talking about normalization after the worst supply chain chaos. Yet many categories still faced volatile energy costs, labor constraints, and cautious inventory management. So even as headline inflation cooled, the hidden toll booths inside the cold chain remained. Ask yourself, if you are a supermarket buyer and freezer space near your port is tight, do you negotiate like you have options, or do you pay up to protect availability? If you are a poultry exporter and power costs jump, do you rush product out or hold it until economics improve? If you are a small distributor competing with a multinational for refrigerated slots, who gets priority when capacity is scarce? We all know the answer. The consequences reach beyond price tags.